Welcome to the RD Squeeze. I'm Micki.
And I'm Emily.
And we're two dietitian besties here to squeeze out the misinformation around health and nutrition. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the RD Squeeze.
Hey, welcome.
I'm Micki, one of your hosts.
And I'm Emily. I'm here too.
Yeah, and we're excited to be doing episode 8 of the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about healthifying holiday foods. Is it harmful or helpful? Yes. And I think, along the holidays, Christmas is next week right now. And, all of these things are coming up and, we always want to indulge in the holiday foods and things like that. But some people get kind of tempted because the New Year's coming up, to kind of do a reset or try and make recipes a little bit more healthy. And we're going to talk about maybe the pros and cons of that and what that looks like. And just dive deep into what that can mean for different people. So
absolutely. Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited to get into it. I'm just going to check our outline here. So we have, a couple different points of view on this, right? So one thing is that, swaps for ingredients can make things a little bit more nutrient dense. Mm-hmm. They can make them, a little bit more healthy by adding fiber, vegetables, fruit, vitamins, minerals, all of the good things that we need. But does that affect, our relationship with that food? Does it make it more guilty, like feeling when you're having those foods? What does that look like? So I know, Emily, you have some, thoughts about it from an intuitive eating perspective. And I do have some evidence kind of to help back this up a little bit. But I guess the biggest thing is I think that swaps can kind of get out of hand.
Agree.
I think a lot of people are like, I don't know about you, but like when some swaps came out, like cauliflower was a big thing. And I know you have a story behind that. And like everybody was substituting cauliflower for all the carbs and then like all of these different things. And it's like, it doesn't enhance the recipe in a way that like it's going to fill your craving. Like you sent me one recipe that it was a woman who made cabbage steak pizzas. I don't know about you, but like when I want pizza, I want pizza. If you want to increase your vegetables and things like that, that would be a great side dish, but I'm not going to sit here and say that that's going to fill my craving for pizza.
Right.
And so like, maybe if you are going to indulge in pizza around this time, a lot of parties, that's like the main thing. Mm-hmm. Like just make sure that there's like a veggie option on the pizza, or like have side salads or like a crudité or something, just to increase.
What's a crudité?
Oh, sorry, like a fruit and veggie tray. I'm sorry, like a fruit and veggie tray or something. I'm sorry, I'm using my fancy words.
Charcuterie.
I guess, or charcuterie, whatever. But anyway, just like something like that. So, I don't know, thoughts on.
So that recipe that I shared, it's okay to do those things. Like Micki's saying, is that if you want to improve your fiber intake, your vegetable, your fruit intakes, that's an okay way to do it. However, if you're finding yourself wanting pizza, if you're finding yourself wanting chocolate, if you're finding yourself wanting macaroni and cheese, the substitutes that we're looking at here with the healthifying of foods isn't always going to allow that craving to be resolved. So that's where we get into the satisfaction of foods. By all means, if for some reason that you make cauliflower crust pizza, or you use the cauliflower or the cabbage as your pizza, and you find that does solve that craving, there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But over time, where I'm going with this is more the restriction. If you're doing it to restrict yourself from allowing yourself to have pizza, a normal pizza, from allowing yourself to have regular mac and cheese made with all the fun cheese, all the carbs, all the regular pasta, over time, your body's going to want those foods. But if you're doing it here and there and you're still allowing yourself those other foods, there's nothing wrong with that. What we're finding is that it is restricting people, and that's kind of the going on the diet, or I'm healthifying the food so I can allow myself it, but but nourish my body and get the lowest calories. I think that's the biggest thing too, is low calorie, low fat. I don't think we're always thinking about the fiber content, the fruit and vegetable content, the vitamin mineral content. That's what we as dietitians are looking at. But as far as the consumer who might be seeing these on social media and the swaps, they're looking at, oh my gosh, it's lower calorie, it's lower fat, it's keto. That's what they're looking at.
Yeah, like the amount of people that are adding like protein powder to like desserts and things like that. It's like, sure, that's okay, but like also, do you really need to do that? Like, it's never the like enhancement. It's more like, how can I make this lower calorie? How can I lose weight from this? How can I? And it also from a standpoint of people who you're also serving it to, that might also be a little bit like triggering, or like you're putting your belief of like, oh, I want this to be healthier onto these other people when they just came to enjoy the normal mac and cheese or the normal green bean casserole, and like their relationship with food is okay. You're kind of pushing that on them. So if you are going to do that, maybe be upfront and say, hey, like, I'm going to change some of the recipes this year. Like, is that okay? But another thing too is like, if you are going to do that and they don't want to, you know, partake in that, then you're buying all these extra ingredients and you're buying all these things that like, maybe it's not even going to turn out that great. Like, you don't know, like, what if it turns out terrible and you end up like being stuck with this like crappy food because you wanted to make it more healthy, where, you know, maybe if you just made the normal recipe, but just like monitored how much you were eating instead of eating like a whole pan of mac and cheese, just have a normal portion size that's, you know, okay to indulge in a little bit and just enjoy it and savor it rather than like scarfing it down. So like there's a lot of different of that intuitive eating components with that, but also, you know, from an evidence point, you know, there's a few journal articles that we'll link in the description, but there are positive health outcomes that do come with swapping ingredients. And so I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Just know that like, it's not going to be the same recipe that you intended to make. And it's not going to substitute one thing for another. Like if you are a black bean brownie freak, you know, that's fine. Let your freak flag fly.
I made those ones and they came out horrific.
And I have a friend who like makes them and like you wouldn't know the difference. So also like I like, it could be one way or another. It could be how you're cooking, baking, whatever. Like there's definitely recipes that can be made to definitely make it a little bit more healthy, or at least add nutrition to it. And I think that's like the big component here is like, let's think about adding rather than swapping or eliminating.
I agree.
And I think that brings up a good point in terms of like cultural recipes, because I think you see that a lot with cultural recipes. Like, oh, you know, you're making sushi, swap out, you know, short grain white rice for brown rice.
No, you can't do that.
No, you can't. Like, it's not gonna have that sticky component, that structural component. Same thing with like tortillas, like flour tortillas or corn tortillas. You know, people are like, oh, swap those out for whole wheat tortillas in your tacos or enchiladas for like Latinx, you know, type dishes. It's not the same. And you want to keep that cultural integrity. And I think just in general, for when you're swapping ingredients, integrity is like the biggest word I could think of when preparing for this episode. Is like, is it keeping the recipe like culturally? Like if your grandma or like your grandfather or your aunts or your uncles or whoever passed down this recipe, are they going to be like from their grave, like cursing you because you changed out something? Or like also the structural component. So we're talking about too, like swapping, like different ingredients for baked goods. So like one big thing I think is applesauce for oil, which is a great recipe swap. And I think that is something that can be helpful and healthier. But if you're planning on making like a 3-tiered cake out of an applesauce based cake or whatever, or if you're eliminating egg whites or egg yolks or whatever, just know that that can affect the structural integrity. So if you're going to, you know, build up a cake and ice it and, you know, present it to your family, it might not be the best because it might change the structure of the recipe.
Yeah, I think a couple of things you mentioned, one being that like the familial recipes, the cultural integrity of passing down those recipes. I've been there and I've changed recipes and my family's like, they taste it and they're like, this is not your grandma's, this is not mine. And as a dietitian, I thought I was doing right by nourishing my family and giving them some more nutrients in their diet. But I learned over time, no, you know what? They don't eat that all the time. They want the meatballs or the sauce or whatever it might be that is how it is because that's how they remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's satisfying about it and what brings them the memories. So food brings us not only satisfaction taste wise, but memories. Think of the memories you have of maybe walking into someone's house and smelling foods that you can recall and just think back to. Think about the people around you, the environment you were in when you were eating those foods. What does that all bring you? And if that food is changed, it's now not going to bring the same thing.
Right. Well, especially like with a holiday, like, I mean, we're talking about specifically holiday foods.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're talking about foods in general, this can go either way, right?
Sure.
Like it could
Yeah.
be great or it could have its like negative
Mm-hmm.
connotations that we're talking about. But specifically holidays are typically tied to core memories growing
Mm-hmm.
up, whether they're good or bad. But, you know, with that food, like if you're thinking about a specific memory, like, I mean, I grew up Italian. One of the big things on Christmas Eve was like we had the feast of the seven fishes, but
Mm-hmm.
like really it was just specific amount of dishes. Now, one of them was spaghetti with raisins, which probably sounds a little wild, but it was like the sweetness of it. But like think about like if I did that but with like whole wheat pasta,
Yeah.
it would not be the same. Like it would not be the same recipe and it would not hold the same memories. So considering that too, like being respectful of what that means to maybe other people or even yourself. Just
Mm-hmm.
respect that and honor that and know that like tomorrow's another day. You can always enhance or have, you know, if you're feeling a little bit like sluggish because you ate a lot of, you know, cheese or whatever, dessert, whatever the case may be, just have a salad the next day to like maybe help like with the fiber.
With those
Right.
fibrous foods and more, maybe those lower calorie foods then, because you know you fueled up enough that your body doesn't need as many calories. Those are the thought processes we want to try and get into more. And as dietitians, we try and promote a little bit more versus, well, I need to eat lower calories because I had like 500 calories extra, 200 calories extra today, and I need to lose the weight. I think that's the basis of a lot of diet and restrictions is weight. And we are just in such this weight stigma healthcare environment that it is very hard to get around. I was just talking the other day with my family about Barbies and how Barbies have changed over time to be more inclusive of different body sizes. Now, is it the greatest? No, not still, but they are more inclusive. Whereas when I grew up with Barbies, they were all one size, stick thin, and
Impossible.
tall, and
yeah.
like
impossible to maintain or ever
exactly.
achieve. Yeah.
So those visualizations, those things that we were taught or showcased at our age, maybe now your mothers, maybe now your, you know, grandparents, whoever you are, you probably grew up with the Barbie when they were one size and or knew of them when they were one size. And it's just very hard to get past that weight stigma then. Because that's what everyone saw and thought we had to be as females mostly. So
yeah,
it is hard. And going back to then kind of the diversifying of foods and making these foods, you know, healthy during the holidays or more nutritious, there's a limit. You said the holidays are one day. Most of them are one day, 8 days for different religions, things like that. So honor those days, and it's not the whole month though. Now some are a whole month at different times of the year, different time frames. That's that religion, that's that cultural preference. Those are the things we have to honor, and that's part of our culture, part of who we are. We do have to accept and work with the integrity of those, but at the same time, so I'm going to use Christmas because that's what I celebrate. Christmas is one day, 2 days if you want to put Christmas Eve. And then if you're in Europe, it's Boxing Day as well. So maybe 3 days. But most of the time, the rest of the month, you're at work, you have work parties, you have different parties, things like that. That's when the food amounts get to be excessive. That's when we have to look at, okay, how can I nourish my body a little more? I do still want to honor and accept a cookie. I do still want to make something for this potluck, but how can I do it and control then myself? By still nourishing it. Great. You know what? Maybe I'm going to bring a veggie tray because I know everyone else is bringing some higher calorie foods or the mac and cheese, the cookies, things like that. I want to have that, but I also want to be able to have some nourishing foods to get fiber in, to get vitamins and minerals in, so I feel good for the whole month, versus the whole month being all these excessive food intakes, and and it not being just Christmas Day, just Christmas Eve, or whatever you're celebrating.
Well, and I think you brought up a good point. I mean, we're kind of circling back to our previous episode about intuitive eating and like the balance behind all of that, and just like listening to your body. But like another good example, I mean, this just happened because you mentioned holiday parties. Like I had a work holiday party, but then I also had another holiday party later in the day. It was for my boyfriend's, one of the clubs he belongs to. And the work party was in our dining hall, and they just have tons and tons of food out. Like it's really great. Like it's really wonderful. They had tons of desserts and, you know, tons of different food options. And, you know, I didn't want to also, you know, overindulge myself and then not be able to eat at the club party, because actually the club party was having like a little bit of a fancier, and I was able to have lobster, which like was great. So I was like, I want to save my, you know, my appetite. But just like I circled the perimeter and I saw like, okay, what is stuff that I definitely want? And then what's the stuff that like I can live without? So for example, one area they had like a deconstructed kebab station. I was like, I'm not really feeling that. Like there's roasted veggies, there's chicken. So I was like, I'll have maybe like a little bit of the veggies, but I don't need the chicken. There was another station, it was like kibasi and pierogies. I can get that anytime. So I was like, I think I might skip that, because if there's something else that looks, but if, you know, if there's nothing else that's really appealing to me, then I'll circle back. I went to, they were doing like a pasta station. Well, one of the pastas looked really good. It was like a creamy Alfredo, but instead of taking and filling up my whole plate of that pasta, I just took like one spoonful just so I could taste it, try it. There were a couple desserts I wanted to try. So like there was like a hot chocolate creme brulee. So like I like prioritized what I wanted.
Yeah.
And instead of like saying, "Oh, sir, can you healthify this creme brulee for me?" or something, like, you know, that's not going to happen.
Or I can't have that.
Right. Or like, no, I can't have that. Or just filling up on veggies alone. You know, I prioritized what I really wanted from that, and then knew that I was going to the next party, which again, I was having lobster, I had a salad, and then instead of like a potato, I got spinach, because I was like, I know I already ate a little bit. I'm full. I'm not going to want to feel overly stuffed. So I got spinach instead of a potato, and I felt completely satisfied. I didn't feel overstuffed. I had like a little bit of a healthiness like in there, a little bit of an indulgence.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel guilty about anything. Yeah. And another point that you made, which I think we mentioned this in maybe a couple episodes before this, was like the people that, you know, come to the party and are like, oh, I can't have that, or oh, I can't have this, or oh, I've got to save my calories, or, you know, I
didn't work out today, so I can't eat that.
You know, all of that is very, it's not a good relationship with food. And I think, you know, looking at that and just like knowing that, you know, it's only again one day. It's not every single day you're doing this. And, you know, imagine saying that to somebody who worked really hard on preparing all these dishes for you, and you're like, oh, I can't have any of that. I'm just going to skip all this and not have this or whatever. Like that could be offensive too. So just knowing like, hey, you know, regardless of how you feel about it, like there's ways to balance it, but refrain from maybe those comments, because again, you could say all day like, oh, I can't have this, or oh, my aunt does this also. She's like, I have diabetes, I can't have any cookies or any chocolate. And it's like, well, you could, you just, you know, you don't have to announce it to everybody. We get it, we all know. But also like, then maybe just have one or like half of a piece of cake or something, so that way you can still feel like you're involved in it. I don't know. Does that make sense?
I absolutely. And I have family members too who say the same thing. I can't have beer. I can't have this. You know, yes, alcohol unfortunately is not recommended by any means by the Cancer Institute, and you know, because it is a carcinogen, so it is going to promote the growth of cancerous cells. However, if you're having it here and there, and you're having vegetables and fruits with it, and those are inflammatory antioxidants, so they're going to keep your healthy cells healthy and help reduce the effects of any bad cells, or help prevent the growth of bad cells. That's my nutrition 101 for consumers way of explaining it.
Yeah.
So when we're balancing things like that out, as you mentioned, if you have conditions, there's a way to go about being able to have a bite of pasta and not say, I can't have pasta.
Mm-hmm.
Find and learn how to listen to your body. And that's a very hard thing to do, I will say. But that's the practice of it. And during the holidays is one of the best times to do it, because you can sit there and say, you know what? Do I need another cookie? Do I want another cookie? Yes. But do I need it? No, because you know what? I'm feeling satisfied. I don't want to feel overstuffed. I want more cookies during the holiday. I'm waiting for this cookie to come out from XYZ family member that I've waited a whole year to get. So those are the things we want to think about. How can I balance this? And do we have access to those foods at other times that maybe, you know what, I can forego some of that.
Right.
Going back to your example of like, you know, healthifying foods in the ingredients, I've made things myself with dietary restrictions. I did kind of experiment a little bit back in the day when I first had the restrictions and learned about them. So I was experimenting with, you know, pizza crusts, and I was doing the cauliflower, and that's really when the cauliflower was coming out. Now, at the same time, before I forget to say this, at the same time, we're replacing cauliflower for white flour, I will say, or flour. Now, that same time, people were saying white food is bad for us. But cauliflower is a white food. I'm not saying any white food is bad for you. Trust me. That is not the case.
No. Yeah.
But we're contradicting. You know, people are substituting white foods for a different white food, but we have others in the media now saying white foods are bad for us. So then you're going to get people completely eliminating those. So that's one thing. Whoops, there goes our That's one thing. Second, then, to go with that. So I experimented with cauliflower for cauliflower pizza because I hadn't found a restaurant that safely made it for me. So I was experimenting. I made the cauliflower pizza crust. Was it anything like a pizza crust? Absolutely not. It was a wet kind of layer of egg and cauliflower that you could put cheese on top of. Did it thicken up? Absolutely not. Did it kind of get hard and crusty and crunchy? Not really. So yes, I enjoyed it because it was a new recipe. I love trying new foods. But did it remind me of pizza? Absolutely not.
No. And I mean, like, going off that too, like a big one that was like fairly recent was like this chicken crust pizza. I don't know if you saw this.
No.
It was like a can of chicken that you drain, and then you mix like egg and Parmesan cheese, and it was like a low carb, you know, version of crust. And then like you could put pizza sauce, or you could put, like, people were doing barbecue sauce and like red onion or green pepper to make like a barbecue chicken pizza. That's fine if that's what you want, but don't expect that to be pizza. And I know that was like a big thing because people were wanting to increase protein, which was like a huge, I mean, it still is a huge thing. People are like obsessed with protein right now because it's like less stigmatized than carbs or whatever. But regardless, you know, it's not the same.
Yeah,
and
it's not.
Except that it's not going to be the same, and it's not going to feel the same or taste the same or look the same.
It might taste good, and that's again, that's fine.
But if you're craving pizza, prepare to be disappointed. Like,
I don't
like
I have not found a pizza at being gluten-free. We've talked about this a little bit before in our episodes. Being gluten-free, I'm never going to find a nice thick crust pizza that's going to give me satisfaction like pizzas I used to have in Michigan where I grew up that are the thick crust. Any pizza here is thin crust, and now I used to only order thin crust pizza, but now have to restrict it for dietary reasons. I want that. Like my body sometimes wants that. So whenever I get that kind of nice thick, it's obviously not a pizza crust, but if it's a bread of some kind, a roll or something like that, if I get that and it tastes like that, oh, you betcha I'm going to eat a little bit more because I've unfortunately had to restrict it. But I found something that maybe works then. And so again, that kind of brings us back to that satisfaction of foods of your body wants what it wants. If it wants chocolate, if it wants oil in the brownies, if it wants the regular pizza crust, whatever it might be, if it wants regular pasta, that's what it wants. And if you find yourself then wanting more food, sometimes that's because you're not satisfying that exact want of the pizza.
No, that's a good point.
We are all for adding nutrients. If you want a real pizza, just put some vegetables on it. Have a side salad. We were just at a party together, and we had pizza and salad, and there were plenty of other vegetables and other side dishes that we could have.
Mm-hmm.
The balance was there. Make sure that balance is there. If you're the one hosting, make sure you have a little bit of balance for everyone. It's not just for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's for everyone, because you don't know what other people want. You don't know what other people are looking at. Hey, I want real mac and cheese. Like, I don't want you to be putting cottage cheese in here for my cheese.
Yeah, like, no thanks.
No, thank you. So what can we do, maybe not during the holidays, or maybe only for ourselves during the holidays, to promote more nutritious foods and nutrient dense foods? But and then use those foods at other times. Maybe the holidays isn't the time to do that.
Yeah. Well, and something else, like on a more positive note, and then I want to circle to one journal article that I did find. But the one thing I did want to mention is sometimes swaps aren't always bad either.
No.
Because I remember distinctly my boyfriend, Carmen, came to one of your parties and you had a dip. And he was like, this is really good. And you were like, oh, it's Greek yogurt. And he automatically assumed it was sour cream. And you're like, oh, no, it's Greek yogurt. And like, he was like, this is really good. Like, never would have known the difference unless like, you told him otherwise. Like, that's an example of where he couldn't tell the difference, and he actually enjoyed that healthier swap because that had less fat.
And guess what? There's more protein in there too.
Right, there's more protein. So, like, again, sometimes it's not always bad either. And like, sure, you can do that, but maybe just be transparent about. And I'm not faulting you. Like I said, Carmen went hard on the dip. He was like, that was really good, and he wanted to do that more and everything. So, like I said, it's not always a bad thing. It really isn't. And and we're just trying to say, like, just be mindful of the pros and cons of doing that. But the one article I was doing for our research mentioned, people, a lot of people are doing the online ordering and shopping versus like in-person shopping. And one thing that they did find is if there was, they were putting items in their cart and there was like a prompt to healthify an ingredient. So like a swap for one ingredient for another to like make it healthy.
White rice, brown rice. They're recommending brown rice instead of the white rice.
Right. Or like, do you want this instead of this? People are more likely to do that than obviously at a checkout line. If you're going to put them like, hey, do you want brown rice instead of white? People are like, no.
Could you imagine that if someone was just standing at that, like a dietitian was standing?
Yeah. It was just like, would you like this instead? Like, no, thank you.
I mean, it'd be great, but again, pros and cons here. Yeah.
Right. But like, in that article, it said, that did help improve health outcomes. People are more likely to make like cognizant choices of what they were putting in their cart. But there's two things that we have to consider for that. One, is that like almost an impulse buy? Like, the same thing when you're kind of going past the gum and candy in, your regular grocery store and you're like, oh, I do need mints. Like, is that an impulse buy, or is it almost guilting you to choose that because it's like a prompt? And, also, is it like going to affect the recipe in like any way? Like, and have you not considered that?
And going back to the sushi example, do you know that brown rice is not going to create a sticky mixture of rice so you can actually make the sushi? Do you know that? And if you don't know that, then your recipe is not going to turn out.
They're going to be like, oh, they're making the substitute. Like, they definitely, like, it's the same thing if you order like through Uber Eats or like whatever. And they're like, hey, we're out of this. We're going to substitute this. And they ask you yes or no. And you're like, either yes or no. Like, yeah, it is, or no, it's not. Right. Sometimes it's not even remotely the same thing. Like, they're like, hey, we're out of tortillas. Here's a banana. Like, no, that's not similar. But also then, that affects the price as well. Which I think sometimes people are like, oh, you think you're getting a deal almost. Like, even like, the free shipping kind of like, oh, I have to spend this much money to get free shipping. Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, here's this like healthier ingredient. Oh, that looks comparable to price. And then you add it to your cart. And then suddenly you're realizing like you're way over maybe budget, or you're spending more than you needed to, or the quantity is completely different. So maybe you needed, let's say a pound of flour and, it's substituting coconut flour, which is only like a couple ounces of it. And it's like the same price, but like you didn't really realize at the time that it would be different. Like, you also have to be cognizant of that. And just because it's promoting it right in front of you, and yes, you are likely to make those choices, and it does have positive health outcomes, doesn't mean it's all going to be the same, and just
because then that's privilege there too, that we've talked about in other episodes of like, well, I can afford these ingredients, so because it is more nutrient dense, I can afford those. But for someone else who maybe wants to do that substitution and can't, they're not going to be able to afford maybe all those ingredients, because you might not just need one substitution. Just not thinking of a specific swap example, but like a lot of gluten-free flours, you need additional ingredients to make sure that there's a binding component there. So you might need guar gum, and like that's expensive. So if you're someone who's on a dietary restriction of some kind and needs not just one flour, because those flours don't have the binder, that's the gluten, that's why if they're gluten free, you don't have that. And so you need additional ingredients. I can't think of any other examples right now, but just think of like, what are the additional ingredients? And yeah, that's going to cause me to actually spend more. So when we healthify, as we've been saying, some of these foods, are we actually spending more? And is there a different way we could actually add nutrients? Like, oh, I already have lettuce at home. Like I can just eat a salad with my pizza and not like make this pizza and time. So many people just don't have time to maybe do these things.
Yeah.
You need maybe a dinner meal. You are bringing your athlete home from school and their practice, and it's now 8:00 at night and they have to eat something. Well, maybe you have some of those more nutrient dense foods at home already that you planned for. And then, yeah, the pizza's the fast thing that they can get their carbs in, get some protein in from the cheese, and have some other things on the side. So at least then they're nourishing their body.
One other point that like I just thought of from personal experience was, I know I needed like carrots I was going to make chicken soup, and I needed to buy carrots, and I went to Aldi and they were actually out of regular carrots. So I was like, oh, like, let me see if they have other carrots, available. And they had organic ones, and they were like a completely different price. And I was like, well, I'll just go to a different store. Now, again, that's a little bit more privileged because I have another grocery store that's very close to me that I could go to. But like, I wasn't willing to spend the extra $2 in person.
Yeah.
So like, again, if you're seeing that, like, even if they're recommending, an organic substitute or something, that's not changing the nutrition value of it. And I think this is our infamous phrase. In a future episode, we're going to cover organic versus non-organic, things like that. But regardless, like, it doesn't help, and it's just really more expensive. So I forego the carrots for now. And so just kind of thinking of that, like, it might be a different scenario when you're in front of your computer and it might not seem much of a difference, but just to be cognizant of that otherwise. But yeah,
absolutely. That the food budget is something that just keeps going up and up these days. So just keep an eye on that. And I like how you said it's kind of like that impulse buy too, or the guilt. I think that's another thing, is they're now guilting me in that the white rice is bad. No, it's not a bad choice, because if you're making sushi, we're going to keep going back to that. If you're making sushi, you need white rice. Like, sure, maybe there's a way you can incorporate some brown rice, but do you need to buy it? Do you want to buy it? Do you have to buy it? No.
And there are sushi restaurants that will use brown rice, but again, they're sushi chefs. I'm not a sushi chef, so it's not going to be the same thing.
Right.
But even like another example we talked about even before we started to record was like risotto.
Yeah.
And like, you need a short grain arborio rice to make risotto because it creates that starch. You cannot just substitute a 5-minute Minute Maid. Was that? No, not Minute Maid. Minute rice. Like, you can't substitute that because it's par cooked.
Right.
It's not going to have as much starch. Like,
or like farro or barley. Like, you can't substitute those more whole grains, which yes, we want to incorporate into your diet, but you can't do that with a risotto.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you want like a different, it's not really risotto, but it's something, I don't know. Like, it's just not going to be the same.
Yeah.
I feel like we've covered everything on our list for this topic.
Yeah, I think so.
Any other last words regarding this?
I don't think so. We'll make sure to put some of these links of the journal articles in the link to the episode, so you can reach out and look at those as you want.
Yeah.
But should we get to our sweet and sours?
Yeah, let's get to our sweet and sours.
Okay.
Do you want to do sour first? And then I know we both have to remind ourselves.
I know.
We did pre-plan,
we
but
did. I have my clipboard here.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll go first. My sweet is, I am just so happy that we got to start doing this podcast.
Aww.
And we're almost done with season 1. which I think has gone great. So we're getting to the end of it here, and we're going to start up season 2 right in the new year.
We've already started
and
planning.
Get some recordings done and then get that out to you fairly shortly in the new year. So I'm excited. We're just continuing on with this fun journey together.
Yeah. I think I'm going to do my sour first, and then I'll end on a sweet, but it's not going to be like a very conclusive sweet, but regardless, my sour is I'm so sad. We were just talking about it. The sicknesses that are going around. I feel like I have been fighting sickness every single week of the past few months, just because, being run down and things like that. But even like today, I was like, I'm not feeling like my best. And, we have a little bit of a cough or whatever. Yeah. And I'm just like, I'm ready for that all to be gone and just be.
And it's almost like we're
healthy.
Just getting into the like winter season when everyone gets sick. But I've got a cough that's been like for 2 months. It's just like this little thing.
Yeah. And I've heard there's like a stomach bug going around and just like all these different things. So if you're, out there, please be, healthy and safe and, wash your hands.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah. Do you want to do your...
I'll do my sour so you can...
Okay.
So mine is, as you know, we just said what season we're in. So the very low temperatures that we're getting, it just makes me like not motivated. And I'm sure many people are like this, you lose the motivation. I think the only thing now is that winter solstice has gone by yesterday. So now we're into the longer days. And at least that kind of helps the motivation, is that we're going to be getting the sunshine, hopefully, or at least later days here sooner, and hopefully that'll help the motivation. But these low temperatures just make you want to curl up under a blanket and not go anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh. I totally agree. I'm very much like a couch potato right now. Like I just want to be curled up with my dog, watching movies or reading a book or something and just like cuddled. But all right, well, I will finish with my sweet and then we'll wrap up today's episode. So my sweet is, I think I mentioned this in maybe a past episode. If not, you know this, but I am pursuing my PhD right now. And I just like to say I got an A in my class that I took this past semester. So I'm very happy about that. Thank you. It was a diversity and inclusion class. So it was really, really interesting. I wrote a really in-depth paper about like disparities with women being diagnosed with ADHD. So maybe again, that might be something we talk about in a later episode. But regardless, it was a great class and I got an A. So I'm at a 4.0 right now. Very happy about that. I can't do more than one class a semester though, because it's like way too overwhelming.
That's too hard. Yeah, with full-time jobs, it's just, you can't anymore. You really can't.
Then I was talking to one girl who's like in my classes and she was like, I took 4 this past semester. She's like, I wanted to cry every day. And I was like,
oh my goodness.
I would never. I took 2 the one semester and I was like, I want to cry. So yeah, it's just been a long road.
Well, congrats. You're done with that one. So even though it was a very interesting one. And,
that one I was like very excited about. So I'm sad it's kind of over. I really liked the professor for that class too. So
see, I just want to go back to college and get my PhD without doing any of the work. Like, I just want to sit in class and learn.
Right.
Like, just like a little post test or something.
Yeah. Like, do I have to write?
Let me write a couple little paragraphs, but that's it. But otherwise, I can't do what you do. So I give you all the credit.
Oh, thanks. I know. So that's why when I say like, I'm so busy, I mean, Emily knows I have a lot on my plate. So, but very happy to be here as well. And, I am so glad that we did the podcast, and regardless of, how many times we have to reschedule because of my schedule. I'm very happy. And like, I just feel like this has been, a really great, I guess, addition to my life. And I mean, I'm glad that we get to bond almost every week and just kind of be in more contact, I guess. So it's very exciting, but
that's kind of the point. So.
Yeah. But all right. Well, that wraps up this episode 8 of the RD Squeeze. And if you're, interested in commenting, liking, sharing, please do so. Your support means the world to both of us. For those of you who do listen regularly. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram. We will always take topics you want to hear about, so message us for any topics you want to see covered on the RD Squeeze. Don't forget, it's dietitian with a T. We'll see you next time on the RD Squeeze.